There is a war that has been fought for 4,000 years, not over land, not over oil, not over political borders drawn by colonial powers on paper maps. This war is older than any of those things. It is older than Islam, older than Christianity, older than the Roman Empire that once ruled both of these peoples simultaneously. This war began in the pages of the oldest book in human existence. And according to that same book, it will not end until the final chapter of human history is written. Iran and Israel are not enemies by accident. They are enemies by prophecy. What you are about to watch is not a political analysis. You will not hear talking heads debating foreign policy. What you will hear is the ancient record, the words of prophets who lived 600, 700, 2,000 years before the birth of the modern nation-state, describing with surgical precision the conflict you are watching unfold on your phone screen right now in 2026. Stay with this until the end, because the final prophecy in this video describes not just what happens between Iran and Israel, it describes how this ends, for everyone. To understand why Iran and Israel are at the center of biblical prophecy, you have to go back further than most people are willing to go. Not to 1948, not to the Islamic Revolution of 1979, not to the Balfour Declaration or the fall of the Ottoman Empire. You have to go back to a man named Abraham, standing in the desert of ancient Canaan approximately 4,000 years ago, receiving a promise from God that would divide the entire human story into before and after. God told Abraham that his descendants would inherit a specific land, that they would become a great nation, that those who blessed them would be blessed, and those who cursed them would be cursed. This is recorded in Genesis chapter 12. It is one of the most consequential statements in all of human literature, not because of its religious implications alone, but because of what history does with it for the next 4 millennia. Every empire that made the destruction of the Jewish people its mission is now a museum exhibit. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Third Reich. Each of them at the height of their power turned their full force against the Jewish people. Each of them is gone. The Jewish people remain. This is not coincidence. This is the most statistically improbable pattern in recorded human history, and it is exactly what Genesis 12 promised. Now look at Iran. The modern Islamic Republic of Iran was born in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini led a revolution that overthrew the Shah and established a theocratic state built on a specific ideological foundation. That foundation included, from its very first days, the explicit goal of eliminating the State of Israel. This was not a diplomatic position, it was a theological one. The Islamic Republic declared Israel an illegitimate entity that had no right to exist on what it called occupied Muslim land. It began funding, training, and arming proxy groups whose stated purpose was the destruction of the Jewish state. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. All of them funded in whole or in significant part by Tehran. By 2024, the conflict had escalated beyond proxy warfare. Iran launched direct missile and drone strikes against Israeli territory, the first time in history that Iran had attacked Israel directly with its own weapons from its own soil. Israel responded with strikes inside Iranian territory. 2 nuclear threshold states exchanging blows directly for the first time. The world held its breath. Most analysts described this as an unprecedented escalation, but the prophets of the Bible described it as an appointment. Open the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38. Ezekiel was a prophet writing in Babylon around 590 BC, 26 centuries before the Islamic Republic of Iran existed, 26 centuries before the modern state of Israel existed, 26 centuries before the word nuclear had any meaning in any human language. He wrote this, "The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, prophesy against him. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Persia." That word requires no interpretation, no theological gymnastics, no creative reading. Persia is the ancient name for the nation we call Iran today. The Iranians themselves call their country Iran, which means land of the Aryans, but the ancient world knew them exclusively as Persia. The Persian Empire, Cyrus the Great of Persia, Darius of Persia. The same geographic territory, the same people, the same cultural and ethnic lineage, named Persia in Ezekiel 38, and named Iran on your news channel in 2026. Ezekiel named Iran as one of the primary members of the coalition that marches against Israel in the final conflict 26 centuries before it happened. But Persia is not alone in Ezekiel's vision, and this is where the prophecy becomes almost unbearable in its precision. Scholars have debated the identity of Gog and Magog for centuries. But the geographic consensus among biblical historians is remarkably consistent. Magog refers to the lands north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, the region we know today as Russia and the former Soviet republics. Meshech and Tubal are ancient names for regions in what is now Turkey and southern Russia. Gomer and Beth Togarmah are widely identified with Turkey and parts of Central Asia. Look at the coalition Ezekiel describes: Russia, Turkey, Iran, Libya, Sudan. Now open any geopolitical briefing from 2024 or 2025. Russia and Iran have signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement, the deepest military and economic alliance between the two nations in modern history. Turkey under Erdogan has broken from its NATO alignment and moved dramatically toward Russia and Iran on multiple geopolitical fronts. Libya remains a fragmented state, with Iranian-aligned factions operating inside it. The Houthis in Yemen, backed by Iran, have declared war on Israel and attacked Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea. Ezekiel drew this map from a Babylonian exile 26 centuries ago, and it matches the front page of every major newspaper in 2026. Now examine what Ezekiel says happens when this coalition moves against Israel. He describes a great shaking, earthquakes, confusion within the ranks of the invading forces, a supernatural intervention that destroys the coalition not through Israeli military power alone, but through events that defy conventional military explanation. He describes fire and sulfur falling. He describes 5/6 of the invading army being destroyed. He describes the aftermath taking 7 months to bury the dead. This is not the description of a conventional war. This is the description of something that makes every military calculation on Earth irrelevant. And immediately after this, in Ezekiel 40 through 48, the prophet describes the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, the restoration of worship, a new order beginning. The war with Iran and its allies is not the end of the story in Ezekiel. It is the beginning of what comes next. And what comes next, according to the text, is something the world has never seen before. There is a second prophetic thread running alongside Ezekiel that adds a dimension most commentators miss. The book of Daniel, chapter 8. Daniel received a vision of a ram with 2 horns charging westward, northward, and southward. No animal could stand against it. It did as it pleased and became great. Then a goat came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. The goat charged the ram in great rage, struck it, shattered its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel and gave him the interpretation directly. The 2-horned ram represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece. This vision was fulfilled in precise historical detail when Alexander the Great, coming from the west with terrifying military speed, destroyed the Persian Empire in a campaign between 334 and 330 BC. The text says the goat crossed the earth without touching the ground. Alexander's military campaigns were the fastest in the ancient world. He moved with a velocity that left his enemies unable to react. But here is what most people miss. The reason Daniel chapter 8 matters in 2026 is not the fulfillment with Alexander. It is the structure of the prophecy itself. Daniel is shown that Persia, Iran, is brought low by a Western power, and that this pattern repeats in the end times. A final confrontation between Persia and a power from the West. A final reckoning that echoes the ancient one. The question every serious student of prophecy is asking right now is this: are we watching the setup for Daniel chapter 8's final fulfillment? Jesus himself was asked directly by his disciples, What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? His answer is recorded in Matthew chapter 24. And one of the most overlooked elements of his answer is the geographic specificity of what he describes. He speaks of Jerusalem surrounded by armies. He speaks of the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. He speaks of events centered on a very specific piece of geography, the land of Israel, the city of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. Every single geopolitical flashpoint in 2026 traces back to that same piece of geography. The Iranian nuclear program exists for one stated purpose, and while Iranian officials sometimes speak in diplomatic language, their founding ideology has never wavered. The proxy network exists to surround Israel on every border. The political warfare at the United Nations exists to delegitimize Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem. The theological dispute at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is ultimately a dispute over who has the right to stand on the Temple Mount. 20 centuries ago, Jesus looked at his disciples on the Mount of Olives and told them that the final events of human history would be centered on Jerusalem. He was not speaking metaphorically. He was reading a map, and every army, every missile, every diplomatic cable, every UN resolution in 2026 is pointing at the same coordinates he pointed at 2,000 years ago. There is something happening inside Iran right now that the prophecy watchers are not discussing enough. The Islamic Republic is facing the most serious internal crisis in its 46-year history. Protests have erupted repeatedly since 2019. The Green Movement, the economic protests, the Woman Life Freedom Uprising after the death of Mahsa Amini in 2022, each one larger and more geographically distributed than the last. The Iranian currency has lost over 90% of its value in a decade. Fuel subsidies have been cut. The educated middle class is leaving the country in what Iranian economists themselves call a catastrophic brain drain. A regime under this kind of internal pressure does not become more cautious. It becomes more aggressive externally. History teaches this pattern without exception. The Argentine junta launched the Falklands War when domestic instability threatened to overwhelm them. Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait when his economy was collapsing after the Iran-Iraq War. External aggression is the oldest tool of a government trying to survive internal collapse. The leaders of the Islamic Republic know this. They are applying this playbook in real time, and the target of that external aggression, as it has been since 1979, is Israel. This is not a geopolitical observation. It is a prophetic setup. Ezekiel describes a coalition that comes against Israel with hooks in its jaws, language that implies they are being pulled into the conflict by forces they do not fully control. A regime desperate to survive, an ideology that has painted itself into a corner, a military establishment that has spent decades building toward one moment. The hooks are already in. Now look at Israel. The Israel of 2026 is not the fragile, fledgling state of 1948 that was attacked by 5 Arab armies on the day it declared independence and survived against every military projection. The Israel of 2026 has the most sophisticated air defense system in human history in the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow system. It has a nuclear arsenal that is neither confirmed nor denied, but universally understood to exist. It has intelligence services, primarily the Mossad, that have demonstrated a capability to operate inside Iran itself, assassinating nuclear scientists, destroying centrifuge facilities, and extracting classified documents from the heart of Tehran. And yet, despite all of this military and intelligence capability, the Bible does not describe Israel winning the final conflict through military superiority. Ezekiel is explicit. The coalition is destroyed not because Israel defeats it on the battlefield in a conventional sense. It is destroyed because God himself intervenes. The mountains will be overturned. The cliffs will crumble. Every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. The most advanced military forces in human history are rendered irrelevant by something that operates outside the parameters of military science entirely. This has always been the pattern. The Red Sea, Jericho, Gideon's 300 men against 135,000. Sennacherib's army of 185,000 Assyrians destroyed in a single night outside Jerusalem, while Hezekiah prayed inside it. The pattern in Scripture is consistent and deliberate. God waits until the situation is militarily hopeless, and then he acts. So that no military strategist, no political analyst, no historian can claim credit. The same pattern is building now. What do you do with all of this? That is the question that matters more than any of the historical or prophetic data we have walked through together. Because information without response is just anxiety with footnotes. The prophets did not write these things so that we could build better geopolitical models. They wrote them so that people living in the time of their fulfillment would know that what is happening is not chaos. It is not the random violence of a world without meaning. It is the final movement of a story that was written before any of us arrived. And the author of that story has never lost control of it, not for a single moment, across 4,000 years of human history. That does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you watch the news with detached intellectual interest. It means you understand what time it is, and understanding what time it is changes how you spend the time you have. The prophets were not fatalists. Jonah preached to Nineveh and the city repented and was spared. Daniel prayed 3 times a day even when it was made illegal and the lions could not touch him. Esther walked into the throne room without being summoned, knowing it could cost her life, because she understood that she had come into the kingdom for such a time as this. Such a time as this. You are living in the most prophetically significant moment in human history. Not a moment before it, not a moment after it, right now, in 2026. Watching these ancient words walk off the page and into your morning headlines, the question is not whether the prophecy is true. The evidence is in front of you. The question is what you do with the time you still have to respond to it. In the next video on this channel, we go deeper into the coalition that Ezekiel describes. We examine Gog and Magog in detail, who they are, where Russia fits into the end-time map, and why the alliance between Moscow and Tehran that is solidifying right now in 2026 is the most significant geopolitical development in the history of biblical prophecy. That video is already on this channel. It is the one about the war the Bible said would end everything. Find it now, because the pieces are moving faster than most people realize. And you will want to understand what is coming before it arrives.